Hello, my name is Tristan Breedeman, and I will be your host. This is a show where we talk about what I love and what I'm passionate about. We're going to have on a variety of guests that are masters of their crafts, but also, they're just my friends. This is a show where we talk about anything and everything. Welcome to the Mancave podcast. All right, guys, welcome to the podcast, the Mancave podcast, episode 1. I'd like to introduce across from me, Jason Odell, the pit master of Reading, the
Hello.
absolute legend. He is my boss. I've been working for him for about 3 years now, and this man knows so much about barbecue that it is absolutely insane. So tell us about you, Jason, where you come from, what you're all about.
Yeah. Thanks, Tristan. Also, Tristan, great intro.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. And let's see, what am I about? Well, I'm born and raised here, and I've enjoyed cooking since a really young age, along with camping and all that jazz. So I just have a real curiosity with food and fire, I guess.
Food and fire, I love it.
Yeah, those are the two things. And being out in the outdoors. So for me, most of it's just been a hobby my entire life of just cooking outside.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you kind of do something different than what our home viewers, what they're doing, right? They're mostly on the trigger grill. What do we do over at Odell Craft Barbecue?
Yeah. So I'm looking at and this has just been a long time of me playing and looking at YouTube videos, seeing who's the best around the world. A lot of the styles that I see that do really well are a live fire technique.
Okay.
So you got guys like Aaron Franklin out of Austin. A lot of Texans, especially in Central Texas, do really well with that. You also have Rodney Scott, who does that. Tootsie from Snow's Barbecue. A lot of those guys and girls, right? Because we got Snow, Tootsie. They use the live fire technique. And so when I started, I was using more of a smothering smoking technique, low, slow. The first barbecue I had was a Weber. In order to smoke on that, you've got to kind of smother your fire to really control temperature and stuff like that. You don't get a lot of airflow. And then I moved to a 55-gallon UDS, which is an ugly drum smoker that we built.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, my brother built it for me for my birthday. And when we got it, we just smoked breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Sweet.
I showed up at his house. He unveiled it the day before my birthday. I went to the meat shop, picked up bacon, sausage, tri-tip, chicken, pulled pork, and a brisket. And it was a 2-layer 55-gallon drum. And I got over to his house at 3 a.m, started the brisket, and then yeah, that was awesome. And again, that one is a great barbecue, but it's a smothering technique. So you're using some type of, usually like charcoal or lump coal. The technique we use for our restaurant and for our catering is cooking down real wood fire, which is the live fire. So we actually have a fire burning in our hot box, which is really a challenge to do with a lot of the smaller home smokers and stuff like that, because usually their fire boxes are way too small.
They're small, and a lot of people. So during COVID, a lot of people bought Traegers, right? Can you pull up the difference between a Traeger and an offset? So the Traeger uses pellets, which is technically wood.
Yeah, compressed
wood pellets.
Yeah.
Basically sawdust.
Yeah.
But we're using actual oak logs.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we're getting them out of the foothills here from our wood guy.
Mike the wood guy.
And so we're cooking down real wood. And then because we're cooking down the wood, we're trying to pull a very clean, good fire and very clean, good smoke. There you go. There's a Traeger in Oklahoma Joe. So the Oklahoma Joe is somewhat of the style we're doing, although that looks like a reverse smoker, except ours is way bigger and our fireboxes are huge. And if I had a home one like that, which I've been working on maybe building here just in my brain, I would make my firebox probably as big as my cooking chamber, because I want that much room to move my coals and my fire around. And then the other one, you got the Traeger. I mean, the Traeger, I'm not for a lot of guys, like where you're working all day, I mean, you could throw a brisket on at night.
It's just set it and forget it, right?
Yeah. And, compared to some of the other techniques, you get the really fancy ones with Wi-Fi. Like, I ain't going to really, like, knock it necessarily just because it's so convenient. And with that convenience, you could actually still make a pretty good product. But you're kind of locked. I mean, it's like, it is like I kind of call it like the crock pot or slow cooker of barbecue, because it's just or maybe a pressure cooker or whatever, sous vide, where you just kind of set it, forget it, control it from your phone. Makes good barbecue, but it's not going to take you to kind of the next level. And that's, like you can only change so many variables with a pellet smoker. You can only change so many variables with some of these other smokers. We're changing a lot of things all the time and testing things and moving things around. And even trying different types of oak, different size pieces, different moisture levels of our wood, those kinds of things that we're kind of playing with, all those little variables that a lot of times you don't even think about when you think about just cooking a brisket.
Yeah, I mean, I explain it as like it's an art and a science, and you have to be really focused in this style of barbecue. What made you want to come into going into barbecue full time?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of my friends would say it was obvious. I kind of say I did it on accident. For a long time, I really decided it was a bad idea and that it was a really good hobby. And so I actually, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I quit a lot of my hobbies, which was like golf. I used to play a lot of music. And so I kind of put those aside, and I just started, I made a couple barbecues, and then I started catering, mostly just for fun. And it really was just a fun thing on the weekend. And it wasn't until at some point I decided, well, what if I did a little more of this? What would that look like? And so I kind of made a spreadsheet, and I had a couple of gigs lined up, and I decided to take on a few more. And just things started to get more and more busy until the point right around 2019, I'm looking at the calendar. I remember I was in the loan business for about 7 years before I went full-time in the barbecue. And I remember my worst review was a 4. I'm like a 5-star only guy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do a ton of loans, but I did a fair amount. And my last review I got was a 4-star. And she said, Jason was awesome. He's really great, although he was really hard to get a hold of. And that was because I was actually catering most of that during that loan I was doing for her. So I had all these catering gigs lined up. And so in 2019, looking at 2020, I actually had a huge lineup of catering to where I was like, I think this is a good time to go for it. I've got all these bookings, things lined up, deposits in, and I'm going to more than double what I did in 2019, which should be doing good. Yeah.
I mean, I'd say we're pretty successful. Like I'd say like during COVID, a lot of the caterers were canceling on us. So the caterers are canceling on the event. So they kept on calling us. And from your point of view, how did we deal with the whole COVID situation when people started calling us, be like super last minute, and we're just like taking on a bunch of business?
So, following through on the 2019, 2020, we were jamming with a lot of bookings, and a couple things in March. I was working on 2 of the biggest catering bids I ever had. One of them I actually booked that was going to happen in the middle of March of 2020, and it was for about 350 people. And then I just submitted a bid for another one that was going to be for 1,000 people, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And that was like a $45,000 bid. So we were pretty lined up. And as we hit COVID and everything, right before it shut down, the 350 person gig canceled for good reason. And we had all this brisket in the fridge. Because we were stocking up all the brisket for that cook, because we were already having some issues getting some of the brisket that I wanted, and so I was like, well, we have this pre-order website that we've just shelved that we can launch, and so we launched that, and we sold all of our brisket in like 4 or 5 days, and kind of put a meal together, and so we shifted into basically instead of doing like big caterings, are like, well, we could do family caterings, right? And do like family meals. Yeah. And so we did a pre-order Fridays all through COVID, still do that. And then as things got better, there was a little bit right after, especially after the summer, like October last year or in 2020. There were some people having some weddings and things looked like it was getting better. And so, we would get a call like on Wednesday to do some event on Saturday. And yeah, we weren't doing anything. So I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we just show up and do it and make it happen. And some of the stuff we did like a lot of boxed catering where we drop things off for work. There was some businesses where they were wanting to do stuff for their employees still. So we just people still wanted to eat well, and we just figured out how to navigate the COVID thing and feed people well. So
yeah, I mean, it was quite insane. Like, I mean, you accepted like a bid that was like that day, right? It was like super rushed. Like we were just like going all throughout COVID. It was like, yeah, we'll do that.
So in 2020, yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever said no to anybody.
Yeah.
And if they had 10 people or 20 people, we just figured out how to make it work. Yeah, and there was a gig, and this one wasn't actually COVID related. It was actually we're in 22 now, in 21. But a lot of caterers for various reasons may or cancel every once in a while. And so I got a call on that Sunday morning at 7 a.m. that the caterer had to bail last minute. If I knew anybody, and I was like, what time's the wedding? I'm like, cool. I could cook some chicken and tri-tip real quick. I'll make a quick. I bet Costco's got some food. I can go pick up some stuff. And I think I got some in the fridge. And so, we put together a wedding for 120 people that day with, actually my wife and I ran that one. And then I had one of the other, the groomsmen, he's a chef and he cooked a few sides, like a salad.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it was cool.
So there are many different styles of barbecue. What do you say we pull from over at Odell?
There's two. One is definitely a Central Texas style. I like a lot of Texas barbecue, especially Central Texas. So kind of unpack that, like Central Texas style. It's in Texas in general is a lot like pepper heavy. So we use we've been playing with this a little bit, but like a cafe blend, which was about 16 mesh.
Yeah, 16, 18 mesh.
Right in there. So it's kind of a coarser pepper that's pretty, like you really taste it, right, on the outside. The other thing that kind of comes with the Central Texas style is obviously the cooker we use, which is a live fire technique, and then we don't have post oak here, which is a type of white oak. But we've been using black oak, which is a little bit different, but still in that oak where it's not harsh, or really bitter smoke like you would get from like a hickory, or a mesquite that's really bitter. It's a bit sweeter, and you could use it for basically any types of meats. It fits pretty well. So we kind of follow this Central Texas style, but then we're also from the West Coast. I'm born and raised here. And so you see things like tri-tip, which you wouldn't really see that much in Texas. They have it, they just don't really do it that much.
I've been talking to people like outside of California, really, no one knows what tri-tip is. It's kind of insane. Like, well, so tri-tip is the top sirloin, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very lean, but people on the West Coast, they absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Like that's like their go-to.
Yeah, no, it's very true. The tri-tip came out of Santa Maria probably in the, I think it got really popular in the 50s, 60s, right in there. And some butcher took the top sirloin, and a lot of these big cuts like a sirloin or even a big prime rib roast, it's actually made up of multiple muscles that you could break down even further. And so the tri-tip is this little triangle piece. There's only 2 on each cow, just like a brisket. It's a leaner. It's very much like a steak or like a roast, but really delicious. And that when we do it, we do kind of a cross between we do a Santa Maria type rub on it, and then we smoke it like if we were in Texas, basically.
Yeah.
But not low slow. We actually just cook it to about I call it right between medium and medium rare. Like it's a little bit tight, but it's still got a little bit of pink to it. that's kind of what we go for in there. But that's, having some California. So then you see our sides a little more like West Coast with more salads and stuff like that.
Yeah, they don't like the baked beans and the corn bakes that are super heavy on to pair with our barbecue.
Right. I mean, typically in Texas, it would be like you don't have three sides. It would be beans, it would be coleslaw, and then you got maybe potato salad.
Yeah.
Like those are like the three, and then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely different. Like you kind of have to like navigate that too, because people over here, they just absolutely love like the lighter sides.
Yep.
But people in Texas, like, oh man, I want to go to Texas so bad, like just to go experience Texas barbecue. Because Eli, he's our co-host and producer here. His wife is from Texas, so
oh, cool.
We got some plans to go out there and just taste up some barbecue. Who would be like the biggest inspiration you would say for barbecue? Like who would be like who you look up to?
Yeah, there's a couple of guys, but probably the biggest one for me would be Aaron Franklin out of Austin. There's a couple things really interesting about him. One, I mean, he's arguably one of the best guys in briskets specifically. Like, it's arguable, but he's pretty renowned for his brisket. He's also he kind of shares all of his stuff. He's one of the few guys, like a lot of barbecue guys are in that space. They usually don't want to tell anyone their secrets or what they got going on.
That family secret recipe that they hold dear.
Totally, yeah. And he's just like, F it. He's like, I like teaching, and so I really think he has a passion for barbecue, but he has a passion for teaching other people barbecue. And you can tell it's something he's continually to craft and get better and better with him and his team. But he's been a big inspiration. He's got a couple books now. You can actually buy a backyard barbecue from him. He's got some great YouTube videos. He has a master class now. He's just got a lot of really good information that you can pull from. I mean, a lot of my style is pulled from learning from him and a lot of his videos. Some of the other guys too, Adam Perry Lang. He has a steakhouse in Hollywood. He was pretty active on Instagram during COVID, so I had some really good chats with him.
That's awesome.
And direct message and stuff. But he's a little bit more versed in a wider range of cooking. He's actually a French trained chef that got in the barbecue scene and kind of fell in love with it and hit the competition circuit, and then has a steakhouse kind of in Hollywood area, I believe, and then I think he just opened one in Napa area as well. But he's kind of like a little more, again, more like steak, a little more West Coast, a little bit faster, that kind of stuff, faster cooks.
So what is a brisket? A lot of people don't know really what the cuts of the cow are. But I feel like brisket is like the one thing that people is like their ultimate goal when they're smoking barbecue is like, I have to perfect my brisket. So what is brisket? What are like maybe a few tips that you would share with like the home cook?
Oh, totally. Well, I think you're right. I think brisket is it's kind of the pinnacle of smoking meat.
Yeah.
It's so big. It's made up of two muscles. It's super challenging. My first brisket, I think I cooked it probably like 13 years ago or something like that. And the first one I did, it was good. I did it again. I was super excited, and then it was terrible. And that was like how it was for cooking brisket for the next 6 years for me, where it was basically a coin flip. In terms of tips, oh man, I mean, the big thing is knowing what your cooker is and how your cooker works. So if you got like a Traeger, and I'm not very familiar with the pellet smokers. I don't know how much like airflow they actually get. I mean, I would imagine there's probably a little fan in there, but probably not a ton. You kind of have to decide if you're gonna do fat side up, fat side down. And to me, that depends on my cooker. So it's where my heat's coming from. If my smoker has a lot of top heat, which is the ones that we use, have a lot of top heat, it's way hotter on top than the bottom, then we'll put our fat side up. If you're got a lot more heat coming from below, so like my 55-gallon drum, I start cooking fat side down, because that is actually where most of the heat it gets a little bit of direct heat from there. Even with a deflector plate, that's where the heat's coming from. So I'd flip it upside down. But I think one, give yourself a lot of time. I would not put a lot of I mean, if it's your first, especially if it's your first few cooks, I mean, do it with for some friends that you know
that are willing to try it and give you feedback.
Yeah, or just don't do it for like a big event, like someone's wedding or a graduate, you know, like some really important party. But again, it's a lot about just having fun, and it just takes so long to cook. I think this is why the challenging thing. But I mean, a couple of tips would be, I trim it. I'm a big fan of trimming your brisket. So, you know, and again, this is where your cooker, it becomes a big deal, because to know how your cooker is going to react, you might have to cook a couple of briskets to figure it out. But how much you should be trimming off? I mean, we like to trim off a lot. We like about a quarter of an inch of fat on the top layer, because again, we do have a lot of convection that flows through our smokers, and then we have a lot of top heat. And then, you know, the brisket's really interesting because you got a lean side, you got a fatty side. You're going to get some crispy parts sometimes on the outside. You're going to have all these different pieces going on. Yeah, just cook it low and slow. The only brisket that I was trying to do a fast technique where you're trying to cook it over 300 degrees, and I thought it was terrible. It was just really like elasticy, you know? So just cook it low and slow, and till it's I like it super tender. A lot of people like it really tender, where you can still slice it and it still holds together, but where it still kind of melts in your mouth, and you can eat it with a spoon basically, or a fork, or your fingers.
I know that it's that such a big piece of meat is kind of like daunting for people to like trim that. Is there any like videos or resources you would suggest to kind of help our viewers guide like what it looks like to trim and how you trim it, like the basics?
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron Franklin, again, I mentioned him earlier, but he's got some great YouTube videos that you could check out. I mean, his styles developed, you know, from his smoker from start to finish. But you know, again, he's one of the best guys who does brisket, and that would be a great video to check out. And you know, like you mentioned, brisket. I mean, I've seen a brisket as big as like 8 or 9 pounds, all the way to 20 pounds. Most of them probably get in that 12 to 15 range that we see coming through. I like more of the 12 pounders. But it is pretty daunting. It is a really long process. So yeah, I mean, you basically just keep doing it. That would be the main thing.
Yeah, from my experience, you gotta practice, and you gotta practice a lot and get a lot of good feedback, because there are times where you just mess it up and you're like, I have no idea what I did. So you gotta have someone come by like and check that. But I mean, like brisket is it's such a big thing right now, and I know that I've seen prices go up. Like what have you observed from like the meat market? Like what has it been doing? And what are the kind of like the causes of that?
Yeah. Well, so in terms of meat market, I mean, we've seen, inflation's like through the roof.
Oh yeah.
I think the last numbers I saw that came out was like 8% or something. And so a big part of that is the meat market. So, I mean, raw brisket per pound, you know, we use USDA Prime brisket, so we use some really good briskets.
So what's the difference between USDA Prime and like Select and Choice?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, before that, like when we get into Prime, like what is the difference between the grading scales?
Yeah, I mean, so the USDA will come and grade the beef, and you have the lowest grade is the Select, and basically they're just looking at I think it's just the prime rib actually of the cow. Or only a couple of things, really. It's not like the whole cow, so it's only a part of it. And they're looking at the marbling, the size of the cow, and they rate it. And so the bottom one is Select, which is a really lean cut, and it usually sells a lot cheaper than the other three. Then you have Choice, Choice is what you see most of the market do. So most of your restaurants all around and supermarkets, they all sell Choice. And then you got Prime, which I'm told does only like 3%. So 3% of the cows fall in the Prime, and then everything else is below, with the majority of it being in that kind of Choice and then Select. So Prime's like considered the highest grade on the USDA in terms of like the marbling and the layered, which is the kind of the snow speckled kind of fat throughout the muscles.
It's like inside the fibers of the meat.
Yeah, correct. So it's not like a big piece of fat on the meat. It's actually marbled throughout the meat fibers, which makes it really delicious and tender and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. And so, yeah, we use USDA Prime over at Odell, but we've seen that price just skyrocket. I mean, from the beginning, like when I started, I think we were paying like what, $2 a pound, and our height was like $7.50 is what we were paying.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've been watching. I mean, the lowest I think I've in the last couple of years I've seen brisket is like 280, 270, 299, and then usually I expect to pay like $3 to $3.50, and in the barbecue summer season maybe closer to $4 sometimes, but yeah, we almost for a year now, since March of 2021. We've been paying close to $6 a pound, up to $7, and it hasn't really come down. So we're paying just about double what we normally would be, especially during the winter right now. And that's true with most of the meats, except for maybe chicken. Pork's that way. Yeah, it's kind of brutal.
It's insane. It's just like, is it because the plants are not just producing enough? Is it the farms?
Yeah, so I mean, I only know what I'm hearing, what I've been being told, but it sounds like it's in the processing plants. So what I've heard is they don't have enough skilled labor, and so the supply is a bit shorter. They're paying more for laborers, and they're not as skilled, and so there's basically a shortage on the supply side, which is pushing price up. There's plenty of heads of cattle, is what I'm told, with the ranchers and stuff, which seems to be the case because we've done some catering gigs for some of the ranchers around here, and they don't seem like they're making that much money off of the prices, and are having a hard time as well. But it seems to be the processing plants, so they're. It sounds like it's a hiring thing, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be resolved anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, it's been crazy, like the amount of jobs that are just open right now. So what is it like smoking the different seasons? So like winter, summer,
snow, rain.
I know in Reading, like it's so hot. Like how do you deal with like the heat in between like the two smokers? I mean, I know that it just get like in the middle of the day, it just gets so gross.
Yeah, I mean, you just figure it out. I mean, again, I've grown up here, so I know the weather pretty well. I've been outside a lot, so I've worked in all the weather conditions. Used to work a lot outdoors, but yeah, you just figure it out. Drink lots of water in the summertime. Drink lots of water, and then you suit up warm and cuddle next to the fire when it's cold. And then I think the other thing, just know that in the wintertime when it's cold, the cooks just take way longer.
Yeah,
that always is the case. We've cooked in snow. I've had one or two weddings now where it snowed on that day, January or February, and I just give myself an extra 2 hours basically, and I start my fires, I think 2 or 3 hours earlier, just to warm everything up, and it works.
It does. I know like our brisket cook went from like 12 hours to like 18 hours from that transition from summer into winter. So it's just crazy, like the temperature change from the outside affecting the inside of the smoker.
Yeah.
It's just wild. I mean, because we have to wrap like 10, 15 briskets, and that also draws heat from the meat. I know like a lot of our home brewers aren't going to be doing that mass, but still every single time you open up that door, you're losing heat and you're losing smoke.
Yeah, and in the summertime, it's not that big of a deal when it's 110 degrees out, or at nighttime where it's still like 90.
Yeah.
You just don't lose that much heat when you open up the lid or go to wrap your brisket. But in the wintertime when it's in the 30s, 40s, I mean, every moment you pop open that thing, it takes a while for it to hook back up, and I think we lose a lot of heat when we wrap our briskets.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it could take 30 minutes or so, and we're pulling them in and out and have the doors wide open. So yeah.
So what would you say that the future of Odell Craft Barbecue is? Where do you see it going in the next, 5-10 years?
Oh man. Well, we're jamming on the catering scene. We had our biggest catering year in 2021, and we've got a lot of things lined up for 22. So I see us continuing on growing our catering and having an even bigger year in catering. There was a stat that this was going to be the most weddings ever in 2022 because everything's been kind of kicked back.
Yeah.
So there's this whole catering side. I think the other thing is start developing kind of more restaurant. Right now we're open Thursday, Fridays for walk-in and pre-order from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And kind of getting that a little more figured out. I don't feel like we do a great job on the restaurant side because we never have really focused on it that much. So that's going to be one of my projects this year is figuring that out. And I think kind of in the future, that's where it's going to go. It's going to go into some type of full-on restaurant. In the next couple of years, and then a pretty strong, really strong catering company that, maybe they're kind of separate or very similar in that respects. And then I've got some other side projects that I'm working on.
The rumor is that you've been working on some whole hog stuff.
Yeah, so that's one of my. I mean, sometimes it's hard to know what's a rabbit trail and what's a good idea.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I got in the barbecue. It's just more of just following the fun and being curious. And so I've done now 2 whole hog cooks, and I literally I'm in the middle of booking 2 more in February, which is a Carolina style. So Rodney Scott whole hog barbecue. He doesn't give us very much information like Franklin does, but there's some stuff online. There's some in Carolinas. They're known for their whole hog and their vinegar sauces, and they actually have a couple different sauces. But anyways, been doing some whole hog. Been playing with that. Super fun, very different style, but it's still a live fire.
You have to build that pit yourself, right?
So in the Carolina style, I like to use. An easy way to do it is a cinder block. So I have a bunch of cinder blocks that I just have free floating and make a quick little pit, basically about 4 high. And then we have a grate that sits, at the 2 high height. And then we put a little ceiling on top, which is just some steel that we throw on top. And then we have 2 little doors at the bottom and have a big burn barrel. This is where the live fire is. But basically, we're making our own, instead of buying a bag of charcoal or, stuff like that, we're actually taking wood, again, live fire, burning it down in this 55-gallon drum. And then I built and welded together this little grate at the bottom. So coals fall down, and there's a little hole at the bottom of the drum, and you shovel the coal with a flat shovel underneath the hog all through the night.
That's crazy. Just so involved. You were telling me that you got burns on your arm.
So the first time I did it, it was a little bit warm. It rained all week, and then it was a warmer day. It wasn't that cold, and I was wearing a t-shirt like I am today. I'm pretty hot. I'm pretty hot blooded. I could wear a t-shirt in most of the cold, rainy weather. And I was wearing a t-shirt, and you basically build a giant bonfire in a 55-gallon drum, and it takes a ton of wood to build, for a shovel of coals. And I got basically sunburn.
That's wild.
My neck, face, and arms, and singed all the some hair on my arm and stuff like that. And so the guy who Terry's his name, who's from Carolina that I met randomly, who actually helped me with that cook because that was my first time, and he used to do it when he was a kid. He knew what was up, and he was all dressed. Had gloves and long sleeve jeans.
He knew what was up.
Yeah, he knew what was up. I think I started with shorts and a t-shirt and started adding clothes on.
That's wild. Jason, you are one of the most wise people that I know, and you just are so self-aware. And I really just appreciate that about you. And I was wondering if you had anything for our listeners as we're closing up here, any words of wisdom or any life advice, dad advice that you'd give our listeners?
Story. The brisket story.
The brisket story. Let's go over the brisket story.
All right. So, brisket. So we kind of talked a little bit about brisket, and this is my brisket story. Brisket sucks. I'm just gonna be honest. First and foremost, it sucks. It's a big hunk of meat. It's terrible in the sense that there's not a lot of things you could do with it. You got a couple options. If you cook it hot and fast like a steak, it's disgusting. It's really tough. There's all this connectivity tissue, and a lot of connectivity tissue and those kinds of things. But essentially, you can grind it up in a hamburger. Or you could cook it really low and really slow, or put it in a stew or something like that, right? Where you're cooking really low and slow. So it's a terrible piece of meat, and it really sucks. The interesting thing about brisket is, with some care and some love, if you know what you're doing, you could really transform it. And so you take a brisket, and this is kind of my brisket story. You take this really unruly piece of meat that nobody wants, that's historically a couple dollars a pound, the cheapest beef you can get. Nobody wants to buy it raw, right? Or at least they used to. And it's still the same price as a hamburger, really. And you start trimming it away, all this excess, and you take it away, and then you put it in a smoker, like really low and slow, right? And you're watching the temperature, and we use a lot of temperature gauges often, and you're watching the temperature, and in about 3 or 4 hours in, you're realizing, wow, this is cooking really fast. So-and-so told me it's going to take me 12 hours, but at this rate, it's already about 150 degrees in about 4 or 5 hours. We'll have it for lunch. Holy smokes. So then you might start thinking, I'm going to slow it down a little bit. So you start slowing it down. And then all of a sudden something changes, and the brisket stops cooking. And it starts sitting at about right around that 160 mark, 165. It just kind of stops. And it creates this really like nothing's going on. The thing that you're using to measure the brisket of being done, for the most part, is temperature. And for an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, it's not changing. And in some cases, especially for us in the wintertime, we'll watch it go backwards.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because when you haven't cooked a lot of brisket, what you're gonna think is, oh crap, I'm not gonna have this. I'm not gonna have this ready for I better go get some hot dogs. Like something's wrong. And so the initial reaction is like to crank up the heat, which you can't do, because if you crank up the heat, you're gonna mess with the reaction. And so what's interesting about brisket is they have what's called the stall, and it's probably the gnarliest of all the meats. And what's actually happening is it's pushing out the last bit of moisture out, and it's basically sweating. And it's evaporating that, and there's all this pressure. And sometimes I think of myself like, okay, can you imagine being a brisket, and you're trusting this pit master? You're going to come out to this beautiful piece of meat that everyone's going to want and spend a bunch of money on, and you're in the middle of this cook and you're going backwards, right? Like what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing to me? What the heck? And yet, once you know how to cook brisket and you've done it enough times, you can almost know when the stall is going to come, and you know that it's part of the process, and that sometimes the thing that you're using to measure doesn't really work, at least in that moment. It's actually measuring it backwards. It's like stepping back, when actually what's happening is it's totally normal. It's the thing that needs to happen and take place to move it to the next process and phase. And so to get that nice, beautiful brisket, it goes through this gnarly stall that makes you nervous as a pit guy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Jason, for stopping by. I just absolutely love you, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with you for the last 3 years and for the years to come. So thanks, everyone, for stopping by the Mancave podcast. This has been Tristan Breedeman and Jason Odell. Thank you very much.